Hi coders, so we are getting into our CPT coding now. So this is chapter 22. This chapter is on modifiers. So as you can see from your chapter in your book, a modifier is a 2-character code that somehow adds to the description of the service. Okay, so it provides additional details to the description. So some examples: professional component, technical component. We'll talk about that more later. If let's say there was a surgery and there had to be more than one doctor, okay, more than one location. If only part of it was done. Bilateral, meaning both sides. So let's say a code says that you did a procedure to one eye. And that's what the code description says. But you actually, or your physician actually did both eyes. So you would attach a 50 modifier to indicate that it was both sides. Okay, so things like that. Okay. The best way that I can tell you to know when you need a modifier is just to look in your appendix, which is after your category 3. So mine starts, it's appendix A, it starts on about page 877. And go through and just kind of read those and just become familiar with them. Again, you don't have to memorize them. But it's one of those things that when you're reading a code description in your CPT book and you're reading your case and you kind of put it together, oh, hey, that sounds like it could need a modifier. Again, it's not memorizing it. It's just being familiar enough with the modifiers to know, oh, hey, red bell goes off. I need to go to my appendix and look to see if there's a modifier. Okay. All right, so let's scroll down a little bit here. So we're going to there are going to be different kinds of modifiers, and I don't really want you to get kind of hung up in this. CPT modifiers like anesthesia or a team. We'll talk about this more when we talk about anesthesia, and I think it's chapter 24. Physical status modifier. So when you have an anesthesia CPT code, it's going to start with a 0. Remember, CPT codes are 5 digits. Anesthesias always start with a 0. So anytime that you have a CPT code that starts with a 0, you have to have what's called a physical status modifier that goes with it. So it's going to be a P and either a 1 through a 5 or a 6. Okay? We'll talk about that in the anesthesia section. But just know, anytime you have a 0, a code that starts with 0, you're going to have a P, what we call a P code, or a physical status modifier. Okay? And then here's some things like location, site. Okay, so here it talks about HCPCS. Okay? You do not have to buy a HCPCS book. Okay? So down here, it's going to say you should follow along in your HCPCS book. I think it was up here. Yeah, up here it says, you should follow along in your CPT and HCPCS book. You don't have to have a HCPCS book. I don't make you buy it. Okay? All of the modifiers that are called HCPCS modifiers that are in a HCPCS book are right here. Okay, so if you click on this, you might want to download this. I don't know, maybe you even want to print it. I don't know. Whatever is easiest for you, okay? But here is the list that's in the in the HCPCS book of all the modifiers. So it describes them, it breaks them down into CPT modifiers, category 2, what they call HCPCS modifiers. Okay, now I know it's a lot, but don't get too overwhelmed, okay? Especially when they talk about HCPCS, they're talking about eyelid, digits, so if it's a finger or a toe, okay, so things like this. Let's see. Okay, so here's every single list. So here's your anesthesia. Okay. We'll talk about this when we get to anesthesia, because you'll have to have one of these. You might have one of these. Okay, this is just to describe who performed the anesthesia. So we'll talk about that more when we get there. But just know that you have this whole list in this modifiers document. Okay, and then here we go back to, here's where these digits and eyelids are listed. So this is the whole list. So you don't need a Hicks Picks book. Okay, I've given you everything that you need in your Blackboard. So the one thing you're going to have to know, though, is you're going to have to know that that modifier list is in this week, week 11. So I can move that to a different place in Blackboard, but just know you're going to have to refer to this list a lot. Okay. All right, so back to our modifiers. And so the rest of your chapter just kind of describes each example. So here's what we call personnel, as far as who did it, related to providers. Okay. Here's the anesthesia section, which we'll talk more about when we get to that chapter. Okay, here are the modifiers that you can use in the ambulatory surgery center. So example, let's say they went to see more than one provider on the same day. Okay, you're going to have to put a modifier on that because the insurance company is going to deny it, thinking it's a duplicate. Okay. If they had a procedure and they had to discontinue it before administering anesthesia, okay, or after anesthesia. Okay, and then here's your kind of your anatomical sites that we talked about. Eyelids, toes, fingers, okay. LT is always left, RT is right. If you do both, it's a 50, meaning bilateral. You have to just really be careful of the description in the code, because the description might actually say bilateral, or it may say one side. Okay. All right, and then there's modifiers for if the service happens by telemedicine, because that's more prominent these days with COVID and everything. Okay, so go through these and just become familiar with the kinds of things that need a modifier. Okay, and then this section tells you how to sequence them, because there is a way that you sequence them if you have more than one. Okay, so we'll pick back up on chapter 23, and that is E&M, and then I believe chapter 24 is anesthesia.